My name is Emily Hart, and at exactly 3:17 p.m. on a Wednesday that began like any other, I received a text message that shattered 12 years of marriage in a single breath. I'm leaving. I've moved to Miami with Lisa. I've already emptied the joint account. You'll be fine. Don't make this messy. That was it. No apology. No explanation. No decency. Just a smug punctuation at the end of a life I thought we were still building. I was standing behind the counter of the Hart Edit, my boutique nestled in the heart of Charleston, helping a regular choose between 2 silk blouses when the notification lit up my phone. I didn't gasp. I didn't drop the hanger in my hand. I simply blinked, let the words burn into my eyes, and whispered, "That'll look beautiful with your eyes," to the customer in front of me like nothing had just detonated inside my chest. I waited until the shop emptied out, then locked the doors with practiced hands. My heart didn't race. My knees didn't buckle. Instead, a strange clarity flooded in, a quiet storm that pushed every ounce of emotion aside to make room for precision. It was almost clinical, how my brain began sorting files, replaying the past 6 months like surveillance footage. Jason had been pulling away since February. His excuses were subtle at first. Late meetings, work trips, vague explanations about why he couldn't come home for dinner. Then there were the changes I couldn't unsee. The new cologne, the freshly whitened teeth, the gym obsession after. A decade of sedentary comfort. The password changes on his phone. The new receptionist, Lisa, 23 and wide-eyed, whose name he'd slipped one too many times with too much ease. I knew. I didn't want to admit it back then. But I knew. 3 months ago, when I noticed the first business dinner that didn't match his company's card statement, I opened a separate bank account. Quietly, strategically. I moved all boutique profits out of our joint account, rerouted the payroll, transferred the property title of my warehouse space to the LLC that bore only my name. Every decision, every document, archived. Not because I expected a betrayal like this, but because I knew, deep down, he had already left. Today, he just confirmed it. My fingers hovered over my phone. I typed one word: congratulations. And then I turned it off. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, our bedroom, which now felt like a crime scene, and sorted through receipts, statements, and legal documents. I found the old prenup Jason had never cared to update, the one that, to his great misfortune, we'd never voided when we bought this house. My house, technically. Paid for in part by my grandmother's inheritance, deeded in my name only. I scanned it into my laptop, added it to a folder titled Exit Strategy. By midnight, the lights in the house were off, but the glow of my computer illuminated the only truth I needed to remember. He thought I would be broken. He thought I would fall apart. He had no idea I'd been documenting his every lie. Around 2 a.m., my lawyer, yes, I had one lined up for months, replied to my email. "It's go time," was all she wrote. I responded with every attachment, every screenshot, and one sentence. He made the first move. I'll make the last. I poured a glass of wine, the good kind I was saving for our anniversary. Guess I found a better use for it. The next morning, I walked into the boutique like a woman on a mission. I unpacked new arrivals, greeted customers with genuine smiles, and rang up purchases with a steady hand. No one could tell that my husband had just detonated our life together via text message. No one could see the war quietly unfolding behind my eyes. At 11:34 a.m., my phone buzzed again. "Don't drag this out, Emily. You'll only embarrass yourself. Just sell the boutique and split the profit." I stared at the message, stunned by the entitlement. He truly believed the boutique, my boutique, was something he had a claim to. He hadn't invested a dime. He'd never even stepped foot in the store on opening day. He'd once called it a glorified Etsy shop, I didn't respond. At noon, the boutique door chimed. A courier entered with a delivery envelope. Inside was a notice. Jason had filed for divorce in Miami. My lawyer had already intercepted the paperwork online, but seeing the physical document, with that bold heading and his signature at the bottom, felt like a slap I didn't flinch from. I folded it neatly and added it to my file. That evening, I sat in the same living room where we'd once hosted family holidays, laughing over burnt pies and red wine, and looked around at the life we'd painted together. Or rather, the life I'd painted while he critiqued the brushstrokes. I was no longer sad. I was ready. Jason thought he had blindsided me. He thought that by emptying our joint account and running off with a woman half his age, he'd won some twisted game. What he didn't realize was that I'd been playing a longer game, one that started the first time I sensed his loyalty shift. While he was falling for infatuation, I was building an armor of independence. This is only the beginning. Stick around. The real story starts now. And trust me, you won't want to miss the ending. Subscribe if you believe in smart women, real. Revenge, and the quiet power of staying 10 steps ahead. The morning after the message, the one that detonated 12 years of marriage in a single line, was silent. Not the comforting silence of a sleeping house or a peaceful morning. No, this was a silence that felt staged, theatrical, like the pause before a curtain rises and the real performance begins. Except this time, the play wasn't fiction. It was my life unraveling on cue. I made coffee like I always did, except the sound of the machine sputtering to life felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else's routine. Every movement felt detached, my hands pouring the milk, the steam, fogging up the window, like I was watching myself from a distance. Jason used to call me a creature of habit. Funny. He said it like a flaw. But today, my habits were the only anchor I had left. By 8 a.m., I was dressed in a navy blouse, fitted slacks, and the heels he always said were too serious. I looked at myself in the mirror. No puffy eyes, no smudged mascara. Just steel. I didn't have time to mourn a man who had clearly decided long ago that I was just a placeholder, until something more exciting came along. My lawyer, Andrea Fields, met me at her office at 9:30 sharp. I'd called her the night before, but seeing her in person, with her sleek black suit and the fierce calm of someone who'd seen it all, settled something inside me. She offered no pity, only a clipped nod and a thick folder labeled Harrison v. Harrison. "I've reviewed everything," she said, flipping open the file. "You've been meticulous. The boutique is protected. The house is safe. He can try to argue for assets, but we have documentation from day one. He'll get nothing you haven't already accounted for." I nodded, tightening my grip on my handbag. Good. He doesn't deserve even the satisfaction of thinking I didn't see this coming. Andrea smiled slightly. "He's already lost, Emily. He just doesn't know it yet." She handed me a copy of the divorce petition Jason filed in Florida, filed 2 days ago. 2. That meant when he sent that smug text he'd already been gone. Probably packed. Probably sitting next to Lisa in some overpriced hotel room, congratulating himself for his brilliance. "Let's talk strategy," Andrea continued. "You've done the hard part. Now we respond with strength. I'll file the response today, along with a motion to freeze any marital assets still accessible. We'll subpoena the credit card records, highlight the fraudulent use, and, if you're ready, we can prepare to serve him in Miami." I considered it. "No, not yet. Let him feel safe. Let him think he got away clean. I want him blindsided. Just like he thought he did to me." She raised an eyebrow, impressed. "You want him to underestimate you." "He already does," I said. "Might as well make it useful." That afternoon, I returned to the heart edit. My assistant, Nina, greeted me at the door, concern flickering in her eyes, but she didn't ask. She knew me well enough to recognize the shift in my energy. I wasn't the Emily who used to bake muffins on Saturdays and worry over whether the holiday window display was too subtle. That woman had vanished with one text message. What stood in her place was a woman building a storm behind her smile. Bye. Mid-afternoon, another message from Jason pinged across my screen. Melissa thinks we should invite you to talk. Maybe clear the air. I don't want bad blood. Melissa. He didn't even try to soften it. Just her name in the same breath as an olive branch that felt more like a smirk. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a screenshot, added it to the digital folder titled Evidence, and returned to helping a customer who had no idea I was planning a legal ambush with the same calm I used to style accessories. That evening, while reviewing receipts for the boutique, I stumbled on something that made my breath catch. A withdrawal, $5,000, from our joint account made 2 days before he sent the breakup text. The same day our property tax was due. He didn't just leave. He took everything and left me to clean up the mess like some abandoned hotel room. What he didn't realize was that I had already paid that tax, using the boutique's business account. Quietly, smartly, without his help. As always. The lights in the house flickered when I walked in after dark. The air felt too still, like even the walls were holding their breath, waiting to see what I'd do next. I poured myself a glass of the rosé Jason always said was too sweet, kicked off my heels, and sat cross-legged on the floor with my laptop. The plan was simple. Document every transaction, record every message, track every post Melissa made with him in it. Because yes, her Instagram was public. And yes, she'd already uploaded 2 stories featuring cocktails in South Beach and captions about leaving. The drama behind. They didn't know it, but they were building my case with every selfie. At 11:47 p.m., a text came through. You know, Emily, you never really supported me. I needed more than a wife. I needed a partner. I stared at it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and for a moment, I thought of all the late nights I worked to help pay off his debts, the weekends I gave up for business expos he mocked, the birthday he forgot because he was too tired, but later, admitted he'd been at a bar with coworkers. And now, this? I typed back one word, projection. Then I blocked him. Outside, the wind had picked up, leaves scattered across the porch like whispers I refused to hear. I closed my laptop, placed it beside me, and leaned back against the wall. I wasn't just planning anymore. I was positioning, and every word he wrote, every reckless move he made, was pushing me closer to a victory he'd never see coming. He wanted a clean escape. What he didn't know was, I was already holding the map. By the 3rd day, the silence from Jason wasn't just suspicious. It was strategic. His texts had stopped. Not a word from him, not a gloat, not another laughably arrogant line. Just radio silence. The kind you don't trust. The kind that doesn't signal peace, but plotting. I knew that man. He wasn't sulking. He was scheming. I sat in my office, at the Heart Edit, reviewing inventory logs while Nina finalized orders in the next room. The boutique felt like the only place that hadn't betrayed me. These walls had witnessed growth, resilience, the hard-earned rhythm of success. They didn't whisper that I wasn't enough. They didn't call me old or controlling or dull. Here, I was the boss, and no one could take that from me, except apparently Jason was trying to. Around 3 p.m., a package arrived addressed to me. No return address. Just my name, printed in thick block letters on a brown envelope that reeked of something smug. Inside, I found a printed spreadsheet and a letter with his signature scrawled at the bottom. The document claimed, Joint Intellectual, Property for the Heart Edit, citing emotional support and creative influence as his contribution. There were also printed screenshots of outdated business files, copies I'd long since replaced, where his name appeared once, early on, during a brief and insignificant marketing brainstorm session. The letter ended with a warning. I've already spoken to someone in legal. I deserve part of what you built. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. I laughed, out loud, in the middle of my store, in front of a customer trying on a handbag. Because that's what it had come to. Jason, who once called my boutique a cute little passion project, was now trying to lay claim to it. Like he'd suffered through the 16-hour days. Like he'd negotiated vendor contracts, trained staff, fought for placement in national features. He hadn't lifted a finger for this store, unless you counted him swiping my card to buy whiskey and overpriced sneakers. I texted Andrea, my lawyer. He's getting desperate. He sent a claim for ownership of the store. I'll forward it. She replied within minutes. Perfect. That's the kind of baseless overreach we use to show his bad faith. Send it all. I'll start drafting the response. He's burying himself. I scanned the letter and attachments, added them to my divorce evidence folder, which was now neatly organized with subcategories: financial misconduct, emotional manipulation, and now delusional claims. The more he played this game, the easier it became to win it. His arrogance was writing my victory. The next day, Nina walked in holding her phone, brow furrowed. Emily. You need to see this. It was a TikTok. Not from Melissa, not from Jason, but from a mutual friend of theirs. A badly lit, poorly edited clip with text that read, "What would you do if your ex refused to let go? Toxic sex, so moving on." New life in the video, Jason's voice was unmistakable. Talking to someone just off camera. She's bitter. Always was. Controlling, jealous. She didn't like that I started thinking for myself. Now she's trying to freeze my money, ruin my future. I watched the screen without blinking. He hadn't just underestimated me. He was launching a narrative. He was trying to shape me into the villain in a story he'd already cast himself the victim in. But what he didn't realize is that the more lies he spread, the more proof he gave me of his tactics. And this pathetic attempt at playing the sympathetic man was digital gold. I saved the video. I documented the account. I reached out to Andrea again. We have defamation now, she said flatly. He's painting you publicly as controlling and vindictive. We'll file a cease and desist and notify the court. This strengthens your position across the board. And what about his so-called legal claim to the boutique? I asked. Emily, she said, almost amused. He's citing emotional support as a business asset. I've seen toddlers contribute more to a brand. I hung up and stared at the rows of merchandise around me. I remembered how many nights I'd stayed past midnight, steaming blouses, photographing products, creating content. I thought about the anxiety attacks I'd pushed through when funding was tight. I thought about the times Jason said, "You stress too much," while I fought to turn passion into profit. And now he wanted a slice. The only thing Jason had contributed was doubt. He sowed it like it was a seed, watering it with backhanded compliments and late-night disappearances. He made me question if my success was real, if my independence was something to be proud of, or something I should dial back for his comfort. But now, there was no room left for his version of the story. Mine was rooted in fact, in spreadsheets, in filings, in truth. And truth, as I'd learned, doesn't need to yell. It just needs to stand long enough for the dust to settle. That evening, while sipping tea at home, I pulled out an old vision board. It was something I'd made years ago when the boutique was still a dream. Pictures of shop interiors, handwritten quotes about grit and vision, magazine cutouts of women in power suits and unapologetic heels. In the corner was a photo of a townhouse in Charleston, my dream second location. I took out a fresh pin and added a new goal, publicly clear my name, then expand, because he thought he'd ended me. But all he did was release me from the last illusion that I ever needed him. The morning sun filtered through the boutique's windows, casting long shadows across the floor. I stood amidst the racks of carefully curated clothing, the silence around, me a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within. The boutique had always been my sanctuary, a place where I poured my heart and soul into every detail. But today, it felt like a battleground. Jason's latest move had been a calculated strike. He had filed a motion claiming partial ownership of the Heart Edit, citing emotional investment and supportive contributions as his stake in the business. It was laughable, yet infuriating. The boutique was my brainchild, built from the ground, up through sleepless nights and relentless dedication. I met with Andrea, my attorney, in her office later that day. The walls were lined with law books, and the scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air. Andrea's sharp eyes scanned the documents Jason had submitted. "He's grasping at straws," she said, her voice steady. "But we need to be prepared. He's trying to muddy the waters, create confusion." I nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "What can we do?" Andrea leaned forward, her hands clasped together. "We counter with evidence. Financial records, emails, anything that shows he had no involvement in the business. We build an airtight case." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of documents, receipts, bank statements, correspondence, all meticulously organized. Each piece was a testament to my sole ownership and operation of the Heart Edit. As I sifted through the papers, a sense of resolve settled over me. I wouldn't let Jason's deceit undermine everything I'd built. The next day, I received a call from Nina, my boutique manager. "Emily, you need to see this," she said, urgency in her voice. I arrived at the boutique to find her holding a tablet, a video paused on the screen. It was a clip from a local news segment featuring Jason and Melissa. They were being interviewed about their new venture in Miami, a boutique eerily similar to the Heart Edit. The decor, the branding, even the product lines mirrored mine. My stomach churned as I watched Jason speak about his passion for fashion and how he and Melissa were bringing a fresh perspective to the industry. It was a blatant copy, a theft of my vision. I contacted Andrea immediately, forwarding the video. "He's not just trying to claim part of your business," she said. "He's attempting to replicate it entirely. This is intellectual property theft. We filed a cease and desist, along with a lawsuit for infringement." The legal battle intensified, but so did my determination. I launched a campaign highlighting the authenticity and originality of the Heart Edit, sharing my journey and the boutique's story with our customers. The response was overwhelming, with messages of support pouring in. Amidst the chaos, I found strength in the community I'd built. Customers, friends, even strangers rallied behind me, their encouragement fueling my fight. The boutique wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of resilience, of standing tall in the face of adversity. As the legal proceedings progressed, evidence mounted against Jason. His attempts to undermine me only served to expose his true character. The court ruled in my favor, affirming my sole ownership of the Heart Edit and ordering Jason to cease all operations of his copycat boutique. The victory was bittersweet. While justice had been served, the scars of betrayal lingered, but I emerged, stronger, more resolute. The ordeal had tested me, but it hadn't broken me. Instead, it had reaffirmed my belief in my vision, my capabilities, and the power of perseverance. The day after the court's ruling, I expected silence. Instead, I got fire. Not even 24 hours after Jason was legally forced to shut down his copycat boutique, an anonymous email landed in my inbox. The subject line read, "You think it's over?" The message contained a single attachment, an invoice. It was from a vendor I'd never used before, listing several high-end items supposedly purchased by the Heart Edit. The amount? $432.75. But the billing address wasn't mine. It was Melissa's, I stared at it for a long moment, the taste of dread bitter in my mouth. He wasn't done. Jason wasn't just trying to copy my life. He was trying to sabotage it. Andrea responded to my message within minutes. "He's trying to make it look like you're committing fraud now," she said. "If we don't move quickly, this could spiral." My head spun. The man who walked out of my life via text was now fabricating invoices in my business's name. This wasn't about love lost. It was war, one he thought I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't just prepared. I was armed. Within the hour, we'd contacted the supplier listed on the invoice. They confirmed the order had been made online, paid using a credit card that didn't match any of my accounts. But the billing email listed was eerily close to mine, a knockoff Gmail address with a slight typo. Emily Hart instead of Emily Hart. A digital ghost of me. Andrea immediately initiated a cyber investigation, and we filed a police report. If Jason thought faking an email account was going to destroy my credibility, he had forgotten who he was dealing with. I wasn't the woman he left behind in a boutique full of dreams. I was the woman who had built an empire from betrayal. As I locked up the store that night, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video message from an unknown number. My fingers hovered before pressing play. The video opened in a poorly lit apartment. Melissa's, I assumed. Jason sat in the frame, his voice slurred slightly, his words too clear to be anything but intentional. "She thinks she's clever," he said, eyes red. "But people don't like women like her. Controlling, arrogant. She stole my life. She's going to pay for it. You'll see." The video ended with a smirk. He thought it was intimidation. He had no idea it was evidence. I forwarded the clip to Andrea immediately. Her reply was curt. "We're filing for a restraining order, and I want you to install security at the boutique and at your home. Don't take any chances." The following day, my security system was upgraded. Cameras, alarms, a silent panic button installed behind the boutique's register. My staff didn't ask questions. They saw the change in my face. I wasn't scared. I was focused. Sharp as glass and twice as dangerous. A week passed. Then another. Jason went quiet. Too quiet. Until one afternoon, just as I was reviewing a new shipment of spring inventory, a call came in from the local sheriff's office. My stomach turned before I answered. "Ms. Hart, we have Mr. Collins in custody. He attempted to use your business information to apply for a loan under your name. The alert we set up caught it in time, but you'll need to come down to make a statement." I drove to the station in silence, the weight of it all settling in my bones. What kind of man builds a web of lies so thick he forgets how to live outside of it? When I arrived, they led me to a small observation room. On the other side of the glass, Jason sat hunched in a plastic chair, hands cuffed, face pale. His cocky grin was gone. The man who had once mocked me for being too organized was now caught in the trap of my careful documentation. For once, he looked like he understood. He wasn't going to win. I made my statement calmly, laying out the timeline, the evidence, the fraudulent accounts, and the stolen identity attempts. The officer taking my report gave a small shake of his head. "Honestly, Ms. Hart," he said, "it's rare to see someone this composed after what you've been through." I gave him a tired smile. He underestimated the wrong woman. That night, I stood in my boutique alone after closing. Outside, the city buzzed with life, but inside, it was just me and the quiet hum of resilience. I ran my fingers along a row of silk scarves and thought back to the day Jason walked out. He thought he'd shattered me. Instead, he sharpened me. He thought he could erase me with a text message, humiliate me with a 20-year-old girlfriend, and steal what I'd built, with lies and forged paperwork. But what he forgot, what men like him always forget, is that women like me don't crumble. We calculate, we document, we rebuild. And when we do, we rise higher than before. The day Jason was released on bail, something shifted in the air. I could feel it in my bones before I saw the news. He walked out of the county jail like he'd just closed a deal, not like he'd been caught committing identity fraud. There were no cameras, no press, just the smug curl of his lips and Melissa behind the wheel of a borrowed car, the engine idling like it knew it didn't belong to either of them. I didn't go into hiding. That's what he expected. He wanted me rattled, watching every shadow, flinching at every knock. But I'd already been through the worst part, the betrayal, the humiliation, the gutting realization that the man I once shared my bed with had no problem trying to dismantle my entire life from a keyboard. Now it was just cleanup. The next morning, I arrived at the boutique earlier than usual. The windows were still misted from the early spring chill, and the city was waking up slowly. But there was something taped to the glass. A flyer. It was printed on cheap paper in a bold red font, like a clearance sale announcement. But instead of discounts, it listed accusations. Emily Hart stole from her husband, lied to the courts, fraudulently claimed her business as her own. Ask her employees how she really runs things. My throat tightened, but not with fear. With fury. I tore it down in one quick motion, already scanning the street. No cameras, no witnesses, just morning silence and the smell of wet concrete. But inside, I was already boiling. Jason wasn't trying to win in court anymore. He was trying to win in public. He was counting on whispers to do what legal threats couldn't. By noon, 3 more flyers had appeared, one on the boutique's back door, one on the community board at the coffee shop down the street, and another folded into the windshield wiper of a customer's car. One of my regulars brought it in, her face. "Hale, I didn't believe it," she said quickly, "but I thought you should know." I nodded, thanked her, and tried to smile, but my jaw was locked tight. Later that day, I gathered my staff in the break room. I didn't sugarcoat it. "I need you all to know what's happening," I said. "Some of you might hear things, see things, but I need you to remember who built this place." They didn't flinch. They'd seen the surveillance cameras go up. They knew the code changes, the late-night phone calls to lawyers, the flickers of something dark behind my smile. These women had stood with me through the storm. Now, they were anchors. One of them, Sierra, crossed her arms and said, "If that man thinks he can scare us with printer paper and bad grammar, he's dumber than I thought." They laughed. I laughed too, just enough to push back the chill that had crept into my spine. That evening, I received an invitation. Handwritten, delivered in a nondescript envelope without a return address. It was from the city's local business, Alliance, a quarterly mixer, wine, hors d'oeuvres, press, a chance to mingle with other entrepreneurs and investors. I hadn't attended since the early days of the boutique, when Jason still pretended to believe in me. But this time, his name was on the guest list too. He was launching a wellness brand. That's what the note said. Jason Collins, founder, Truel Mind and Body. I read the sentence 3 times. It was laughable. The man who once mocked yoga as overpriced stretching was now branding himself as a lifestyle guru. Still, I RSVP'd yes. The event was held in a high-rise rooftop venue with string lights and soft jazz, like drama didn't exist above the 15th floor. I wore navy, a power color, and heels that clicked loud against the polished floor like a warning. Jason saw me the moment I walked in. His posture stiffened, but he recovered quickly, slipping into his mask of charm. Melissa stood beside him, awkward in heels, her expression unreadable. He raised his glass toward me in a mocking salute. "Emily," he said smoothly, "didn't expect to see you here." I gave him a measured smile. "That's the thing about women you underestimate. We show up," he chuckled, but his eyes flicked nervously to the nearby journalists. He wasn't in control of the narrative anymore, and he knew it. An hour into the event, I was approached by a young reporter from the Chronicle. She smiled politely and asked if I'd be open to a feature about female entrepreneurs. I said yes. But I asked for one condition. Don't make this about my divorce. Make it about the comeback. She nodded, and I could see the headline forming in her head already. Later that week, the article dropped. Emily Hart, the boutique owner who turned betrayal into a business empire. The city read it. Clients read it. So did Jason. That night, his email arrived. Subject line: "Let's talk." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. His silence had become a weapon, but now mine was sharper. He wanted a reaction. What he got was a reputation. I leaned back in my office chair. The print. Article spread on my desk beside the framed text that started it all. "I'm leaving you and taking the money, haha." It sat there like a monument to underestimation. And if this story has stirred something in you, if you've ever been told you'd never make it, never stand again, never survive without someone else's shadow, remember this: they don't. Know what you're capable of, but you do. Subscribe to the channel. Share this story, because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud. It's success they can't unsee. The storm didn't hit like thunder. It moved in silence, with court envelopes and bank subpoenas. Jason had made the critical mistake every manipulator eventually makes. He underestimated the paper trail. The first ripple came with a knock at my lawyer's office. A paralegal from the fraud division dropped off a confidential packet, stamped urgent. Inside, evidence that Jason had tried to open a new line of credit using my boutique's federal EN without my authorization. He had submitted falsified documents under the pretense of expanding the brand, my brand. Truel Mind and Body was more than a vanity project now. It was a front. He hadn't just wanted to compete. He wanted to siphon from my success like a parasite. We sat in silence after reading the documents. My lawyer, Eliza, looked over her glasses and said, "This isn't just theft anymore. It's federal." I breathed slowly, not because I was afraid, but because this was the final click. The last lock falling into place. Jason wasn't out to rebuild his life. He was out to replicate mine, then erase me from the story. I filed an injunction that afternoon. The court froze every asset Jason had tied to Truel. His accounts were sealed for audit. His PayPal, Stripe, even the half-built e-commerce site he'd bragged about in interviews, gone dark by morning. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came 3 days later, with a knock at my own door. It was Melissa. I opened the door slowly, unsure if I was about to get slapped, screamed at, or handed another legal notice. But she didn't do any of that. She looked exhausted, hollow-eyed. Her hands shook around a reusable coffee cup, not from caffeine, but from unraveling. "I need to talk," she said. "And no, I'm not here for him. I'm here because I found something." She held out a flash drive. Inside were folders, spreadsheets, audio files, recordings of Jason's voice coaching her on what to say if anyone asked about business documents. Notes where he'd instructed her to forward client leads from my boutique to his fake website. Even a half-drafted email to a vendor under my name, pretending to be Emily's assistant, with a new payment address. He'd used her, just like he tried to use me. But Melissa was smarter than he gave her credit for. When I told him I didn't want to be involved anymore, she whispered. He told me I owed him, that he saved me from my dead-end job, that I'd be nothing without him. My jaw clenched, not out of sympathy, but recognition. That tone, that manipulation. It was his signature. "He said you'd ruin me if I crossed you," she added. "But I realized you never tried. You just got out. You built something." I nodded once. "And you recorded this?" Every lie he made me repeat. She didn't stay long. She didn't want thanks. She just wanted it off her conscience. And maybe, somewhere inside, she wanted to be the one to set the final fire. I sent the drive to Eliza within the hour. The next court hearing wasn't scheduled until the following week, but we filed for an emergency evidentiary review. And this time, I showed up with the truth printed, transcribed, and indexed by page. Jason showed up alone. No Melissa. No blazer. Just a man unraveling, wearing the same gray hoodie I'd once begged him to throw out, now baggy with failure. The judge was different this time. Younger, sharper, less patient. "Mr. Collins," she said, flipping through the folder. Eliza had submitted, "You are now under review for attempted business impersonation, trademark infringement, and potential wire fraud. Do you have anything to say before we proceed?" Jason looked directly at me then. For the first time in all this chaos, he didn't look angry. He looked terrified. "Your Honor," he said weakly, "I was misled. Melissa, told me the documents were cleared. I didn't know she'd use Emily's information." The judge raised an eyebrow. "So, your defense is that your girlfriend committed a federal crime without your knowledge, using information from your shared residence, for a company registered in your name?" Jason stammered. But the silence in the courtroom filled faster than his lies could catch up. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But I did lift my chin as the judge said the words I'd waited months to hear. "The court finds sufficient cause to pursue a full criminal investigation. All trademarks and associated business licenses registered to Mr. Collins are now suspended. Pending review. Further, the defendant is ordered to cease and desist all use of the plaintiff's name, likeness, or business identifiers. Effective immediately." He didn't flinch at first, but when his lawyer leaned over and whispered the consequences, when Jason realized his fake company, his funds, his reputation were crumbling faster than he could beg, he sank lower in his seat than I'd ever seen him before. Outside the courthouse, I didn't speak to the press. I didn't pose for pictures, but I saw the flash of a headline on someone's phone as I walked to my car. "From betrayed to unbreakable. Emily Hart's victory is a lesson in grace and grit." I drove home with the windows down. Let the wind pull the weight off my shoulders. When I got home, there was a single box on the porch. No label, no return address. Inside was Jason's wedding ring, scratched and dented, sitting atop a crumpled apology letter he never had the courage to send. I dropped it into the trash without reading it. Then I poured a glass of wine. The expensive kind. The kind I used to save for anniversaries he forgot. And I toasted, not to revenge, not even to justice, but to resilience. To every woman who has ever been told she's too soft, too quiet, too naive to survive without someone else. I survived. I built. I won. The day the final judgment was delivered, the sky outside my boutique was gray but strangely calm, like even the weather understood something had ended. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I stood by the front window, with a cup of coffee, staring at the slow drizzle on the sidewalk, feeling the weight of something invisible lift from my chest. Jason was officially barred from using my name, my business identity, or any ties to the boutique that had always been mine. He was also under state investigation, and though no sentence had yet been given, the evidence stacked against him wasn't just overwhelming. It was inescapable. He'd tried everything: gaslighting, manipulation, fraud. He'd used my love, my trust, even my silence as weapons. And he lost. Not because I struck first, but because I stopped letting him strike and walk away. That night, I hosted a small dinner. Just close friends, a few loyal staff, my lawyer Eliza, who'd stood by me with quiet fierceness. I didn't want a party. I wanted closure. We raised glasses not in victory, but in survival. In choosing dignity over destruction. In having the Courage to protect what mattered when no one else believed the storm was coming. And then, the next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 2 years. I opened my journal and wrote a letter to myself. Dear Emily, you were never weak for trusting. You were never foolish for loving. You were just brave enough to hope, and when hope wasn't enough, you were strong enough to stand. I closed the journal, set it on the windowsill, and breathed in the scent of a future that wasn't waiting for permission. I had spent so long being defined by what Jason did to me that I almost forgot who I was before him. But the truth is, the person I am now? She's stronger, wiser, sharper than she ever was when love made her small. And maybe that's the real story here. Not that I was betrayed, but that I rebuilt. I expanded the boutique, not just in size, but in mission. We launched a mentorship program for young women, especially those coming out of abusive relationships or financial ruin. We partnered with shelters, offered job training, and held workshops called Boundaries and Balance. The same space, where Jason once called my dream just a hobby, became a haven for women chasing theirs. One of those women was Melissa. She joined our team not long after the court wrapped up. She'd gone back to school, earned her business degree, and asked if she could intern under our marketing director. She didn't want pity. She wanted to rewrite her own ending, and I told her, that's exactly what we're here to do. Sometimes I still get messages, women who say they saw themselves in my story. They ask, how did you keep going? Weren't you scared? And I always answer with the same truth. I didn't keep going because I wasn't scared. I kept going because I finally understood that staying quiet wasn't the same as staying safe. We grow up learning to forgive, to be patient, to see the best in people even when their worst keeps showing up. But at some point, grace without boundaries becomes permission. And I had given Jason far too much permission to treat me like a safety net he could burn through and expect to bounce back on. Not anymore. He tried to turn my life into rubble. But what he didn't know is that some women are architects. We don't just survive the collapse. We build towers from the ashes. And no, success doesn't erase the pain. I won't pretend I don't still flinch when my phone buzzes late at night or when I see his name mentioned in old emails. But pain that teaches you to protect yourself isn't a curse. It's armor. It's proof you endured. So what did I learn? I learned that separate bank accounts aren't mistrust. They're security. I learned that kindness must be paired with clarity. I learned that loving someone isn't enough if they're committed to erasing the parts of you that shine too brightly. Learned that peace isn't found in revenge. It's found in reclaiming the parts of yourself they tried to tear down. And I learned that the most powerful words you can ever say in the middle of your pain are, not anymore. This ends with me. To anyone listening who's ever been blindsided, underestimated, taken for granted, let this be your proof. You don't need anyone's permission to start again. You don't need a clean break to find clarity. You don't even need justice to begin healing. You only need to decide that you are worth protecting, even if you're the only one who sees it at first. Because one day, the person who tried to destroy you will watch you rise, and they won't recognize the version of you they once thought they could break. And that's the real victory. Thank you for being part of this story, for listening to every word, for seeing the truth beneath the drama. If this story moved you, made you think, or reminded you of someone you care about, I ask just one thing: subscribe to the channel. Not just for the next story, but to keep this space alive, a space for stories that matter, for voices that rise, and for endings that don't look like failure, but rebirth. Because the story isn't really over. It's just beginning again. On, and maybe, on yours too.